Mr. President, I also want to report on another subject. President Trump has broken yet another campaign promise to the American people. This is from the New York Times. The headline, Trump, the self-declared peace president, goes to war seeking regime change. The article goes on to say President Trump has become increasingly willing to assert American power overseas, a decade after propelling himself to the highest office by promising to focus on America first. Throughout the 2024 campaign, President Trump promised there would be, quote, no new wars, unquote, if he were elected. But early in the morning of February 28th, Americans woke up to a video from the president announcing that the United States had begun major combat operations in Iran. President Trump took this drastic course of action without consulting with our allies, the United States Congress, or the American people. The Constitution makes it clear, Article 1, Section 8, that only Congress can declare war. This president does not even believe in that. President Trump has tried to position himself as a peace president, but his actions tell a different story. In the last year alone, he has conducted military operations across 3 continents, threatened to militarily take over several countries, including Greenland from our NATO ally Denmark. With Iran, we have seen gas prices spike, American lives lost, and risk and uncertainty in a difficult region. All I worried without a strategy or an end game. In the first 6 days of this war with Iran, the administration and White House announced 6 different reasons and rationales for the war. It's apparent when you look at the reports of the countless Americans stranded in the Middle East that this administration did not prepare a proper evacuation plan. It is obvious in President Trump's rhetoric as well. Just last week when he asked if he should be worried about retaliatory attacks on America, he responded, quote, I guess. This is a chilling, callous statement when faced with the prospect of American casualties. Recent briefings from this administration did little to address the same concerns I had when I was one of 23 senators in October of 2002 to vote against our invasion of Iraq. When I listened to the rationale from the Trump administration for our invasion of Iran, it sounds like the echo of the argument made in Iraq. Remember when we were looking for weapons of mass destruction, which threatened our allies and even the United States? We finally invaded the country, took a quick look around and realized there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Now, when it comes to Iran, 5 or 6 different rationales have been used to explain why we invaded this country. First, they said stop them from developing nuclear weapons. We're all for that. In fact, the inspectors who were making sure that they didn't develop them were removed from Iran under the first Trump administration by orders of President Trump. Doesn't make any sense to argue we need inspectors when he removed them in the first place, which he never should have done. Second, there's an argument that they're developing ballistic missiles that threaten the United States. Those are months, if not years, away from development. How do you justify this current invasion? Regime change. If the president thinks he can use missiles and aircraft to achieve regime change, I think he's dreadfully wrong. And finally, the notion that Israel was going to attack anyway, so we might as well join in. When you listen to these rationales, they change by the day. Who was designing this scheme, this plan, this strategy? Simply, it's easier to get in a war than it is to get out of one. The president is going to discover that, I'm afraid. I served in this chamber during the Iraq War. I visited the Walter Reed Hospital many times to see soldiers who had just returned from combat. In fact, my colleague, my close friend, Tammy Duckworth, the other senator from Illinois, was one of those casualties. I'll never forget the rows of beds of young men and women with terrible injuries from roadside bombs and IEDs in the Iraqi war. Many of these brave servicemen are still grappling with the wounds of war, whether from traumatic brain injuries or PTSD they sustained in combat. That is the real cost of war, a war which this administration cannot explain the rationale for. When you go to war, president says some people will die. Sadly, he's telling us the truth, the reality of war. And we should remind American people regularly that this president promised that would never happen, and yet it has. Americans are not asking for another foreign entanglement. They're asking for a president who puts the American people first in terms of the challenges, the real challenges, the cost of living that they face every day. President Trump has found billions of dollars. We're spending over $1 billion a day in Iran to wage this war. But he cannot spare a penny to help Americans afford their groceries, mortgage, or health insurance. My constituents are already paying more on their gas and energy bills because of the chaos the president has created in the Middle East. That is likely to get worse. There is no love lost between America and the Iranian regime for decades. It has been a menace to the region, its own people. It is a worthwhile objective to prevent them from sponsoring terrorism and building nuclear weapons. But impulsive military attacks carry tremendous risk, uncertainty, and cost that may confront us in the region for months and years to come. That is the reality of war. When I look back, there are 3 of us left in the Senate who voted against the invasion of Iraq. A recent article in the New York Times written by Carl Hulse went and asked senators who voted for the war in Iraq whether they wished they had that vote to take over. Many of them said they had. They wanted it to vote, as 23 of us did, against the invasion of Iraq. As I said, and worth repeating, it is easier to get in a war than it is to get out. And in this circumstance, we don't have a clear mission or a clear commitment from our allies to stand by us. Mr. President, I yield the floor.